Elena wiped down the chipped counter for the third time that morning, hoping no one noticed her hands shaking. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap fried eggs clung to her apron. She forced a polite smile as she refilled old Mr. Peterson's cup for the second time, even though he always left loose change and a crumpled napkin as a tip. It didn't matter. Every cent counted when you were paying rent alone and trying to help your younger brother finish high school. She always wore her mother's pendant under her uniform collar, a simple silver charm, no bigger than a dime, but it meant everything to her. Her mom had given it to her the night before she passed away in a tiny hospital room, whispering, "Never forget where you come from, Elena." She hadn't. She just wished where she came from felt a little less hopeless. That morning, the old diner buzzed with more chatter than usual. A shiny black car had parked out front. Too sleek, too clean for their cracked lot. Through the greasy window, Elena watched a tall man in a charcoal suit step out. She didn't know his name, but she'd heard rumors. Billionaire hotel chain owner, ruthless but generous with tips if you didn't screw up. Elena pulled her shoulders back. Maybe today she'd get lucky. One big tip could keep the lights on another month. Her boss, Barry, adjusted his tie when the door jingled. He barked at Elena to stand up straight and smile. She did her best, her cheeks aching with the effort. The diner smelled like burnt toast and old carpet. She knew it wasn't good enough for the likes of him. Elena greeted the man politely when he slid into the corner booth. She poured his coffee without spilling a drop. Her hands still trembled, though, and Barry's hawk eyes caught it. The billionaire, Mr. Griffin, barely looked up from his phone. But when she leaned over to set down his plate, the pendant slipped out of her collar, catching the sunlight streaming through the window. His eyes flicked up just for a second, sharp and puzzled, before settling back on his phone. She didn't notice. She was too busy avoiding Barry's glare. Minutes later, as Elena was helping an elderly lady choose between oatmeal or pancakes, Barry snapped. A fork clattered to the floor. Barry yelled her name so loud the whole diner fell silent. He pointed at the dirty fork like it was a crime scene. "Incompetent!" he shouted, his face red. "You can't even do the simplest things right." He looked around dramatically, making sure everyone was watching. "You're done, Elena. Pack up. You're fired." She stood frozen. The diner was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She clutched her pendant, feeling the warm metal in her palm, as if her mother might whisper courage into her ear. She forced her chin up. No tears. Not here. She grabbed her purse, whispered an apology to the old lady, still waiting for her oatmeal, and pushed through the door. She didn't see Mr. Griffin, watching her every step, his eyes fixed on the little silver charm, glinting against her uniform. Elena sat on the cold concrete step behind the diner, staring at the crumpled $20 bill in her hand. It was all the cash she had left in her apron pocket, her last tip of the day. Her eyes burned, but she forced back the tears. She couldn't go home yet. She couldn't face her brother and tell him she'd lost the only job keeping them afloat. She rubbed the pendant between her thumb and forefinger. She could almost hear her mother's voice telling her to stand up straight, chin high, no matter how hard the world tried to push her down. She drew a shaky breath and told herself she'd find another job. Somehow. Suddenly, a sleek shadow fell over her. She looked up to see Mr. Griffin, the billionaire, standing there like he'd just stepped out of a magazine ad. Except his face was pale, and his expensive shoes tapped the concrete like he was impatient or nervous. "Elena, right?" His voice was softer than she expected. She stood quickly, brushing crumbs off her apron. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry about what happened in there. I didn't mean—" He raised a hand to stop her. For a moment his eyes weren't cold and distant, like in the diner. They were searching, almost vulnerable. He pointed at the pendant around her neck. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. Elena's hand flew to the charm. She felt a sudden protectiveness. "It was my mother's. She gave it to me before she passed away." Mr. Griffin's jaw tightened. He pulled out his wallet, a smooth black leather piece that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent, and flipped it open. He pulled out a worn photograph, edges soft from being handled too much. He held it out to her. Elena's breath caught. It was her mother, younger, smiling wide in front of an old motel sign. She'd never seen this picture before. That's my mom. How do you have this?" she whispered. Mr. Griffin let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a sob all at once. She was my sister." Elena's knees nearly gave out. She leaned back against the brick wall for support. She wanted to ask a million questions, but her mouth wouldn't work. Mr. Griffin stepped closer. "I didn't know," he said. "We lost touch years ago. I searched, but—" He paused, his eyes softening. "Your family. I never knew I had a niece." Elena felt her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She thought about the empty fridge at home, the eviction notices she kept hiding from her brother. Mr. Griffin's voice broke her thoughts. "You're not alone anymore, Elena. Come with me. Let's get you out of here, you and your brother. I have a lot to make up for." She looked at his outstretched hand, then back at the diner, where Barry was probably bragging about firing her. She closed her fingers around her mother's pendant one more time, then took Mr. Griffin's hand, stepping into a new story she never saw coming.